is all the above, best believe we do it better. I want the fame, the fortune, all the above. I want the checks, the moolah, all the above. From Philadelphia to New York, all the above. Man, tell them other stations they don't do it like us. I want the fame, the fortune, all the above. I want the checks, the moolah, all the above. From Philadelphia to New York, all the above. Man, tell them other stations they don't do it like us. What up?
What's up, guys? It's your girl Angel Marie, and I'm sitting here with my co-host Kevin. And this week we have a very special and important topic because there are a lot of things that are going on in the world right now, aside from our global pandemic. But there's a lot of things right now with injustice towards the Black community, and we want to address that because obviously we are a Black podcast, so we want to talk about Black Lives Matter.
And I think one of the things we've always talked about when we started this show is we do want to highlight, you know, people who are trying to do positive things, whether it's in music or whatever, but we also wanted to be a show that was here to discuss important issues, the things that affect our community. So we felt it's a responsible thing to do. A lot of discussions have been going on, a lot of people have chimed in, but we want to definitely give our thoughts to the audience and also use this as a platform for people to discuss their feelings and their thoughts as well. So we definitely want to be there for that. So over the last several weeks, we've seen a number of cases where unarmed Black men and women have been killed by police or non-police, but other citizens, white citizens. And this isn't anything new, but we're going to just talk a little bit about each of the most recent cases that have come up. Many of them, or a number of them, actually documented on video. But first with Breonna Taylor, who lived in Louisville, Kentucky. She was an EMT. She was in her house sleeping. The police apparently were trying to serve a search warrant for a narcotics investigation. Her boyfriend, not knowing that these were police officers coming into the house, thought his house was being invaded, shot and exchanged fire with the police officers. And the police officers end up shooting and killing Breonna Taylor. So she was sleeping in her home, a regular citizen, ended up dead at the hands of police, and no narcotics were found in the home at all anyway. So this was a Black woman in America being a productive citizen, like the overwhelming majority of us are, and ends up dead at the hands of police in her home. So, as a Black woman, because we talk about Black men, and we know Black men probably more times than not are the people who are, end up experiencing police violence. But we also see it with Black women. And, as a Black woman who, you have a house, living in a place with your fiance, can you imagine just sleeping in your bed and waking up to gunfire? And this is how it turns out.
Honestly, no. And it's sad because this is our reality. You don't know what's going to happen. You're not safe anywhere. People always say you're not safe driving, you're not safe walking, you're not safe going out wherever, you're not safe wearing a hoodie. But at the end of the day, you're also not safe in your own home because you don't know what could happen. And for her, and it's crazy because they always try to find bad things with people doing background checks, trying to justify why that person didn't even need to live in the first place. And for her to be a first responder, an EMT, someone who's helping to save lives, and they did that, especially during this whole pandemic where she's needed right now, is sad, and it hurts because so often I feel like Black women are swept under the rug with these kind of issues. Thank God, like Sandra Bland, a lot of people said her name and advocated for her and protested for her. But I feel like with the continuous things that happened within the last 2 to 3 weeks, Breonna Taylor's name has kind of been swept under the rug. And there has been a few people who have been mentioning her, but I think it just goes to show how Black women are still at the very bottom of the totem pole.
And Malcolm X said it famously, and it's been repeated, that the Black woman in America is the most undervalued, the least protected demographic in this entire country. So it's, again, not just, you alluded to it a little bit, but sleeping in your own bed, in your home. Because there's always the argument, well, they should have done this, or they should have complied, or they shouldn't have done this. You can't go any further than your home, in your own bedroom, sleeping.
Being asleep.
And here we are, another black life lost senselessly and needlessly. So unfortunately, it's not the first time we've seen it. We'll see it again, but this is just one of the cases we wanted to highlight, and obviously we'll touch on a couple others in just a second. And the next young black life that was lost that we want to touch on that happened in recent weeks was Ahmaud Arbery. This was another one that got a lot of national attention. Most people know the story, but just a quick recap. He was jogging through a neighborhood in Georgia, not far from where he lived. Two white men thought he resembled somebody who had broken into a construction site, and really he didn't break into the construction site. There was no fences, no signs, nothing indicating no trespassing, and there was no doors on the structure. A lot of people will look at construction sites when houses are being built, so on. So he didn't actually break any law, but they suspected him of being a burglar. A man and his son, can't even remember their name off the top of my head, chased him down with guns, and as they blocked his path, he ran around the car, obviously saw that there was a shotgun and a handgun pointed at him, was fighting for his life, and ended up getting shot by, I think by the father with the shotgun. And the man behind him, who was later arrested, was recording the whole thing. And this was just another incident of us just going through everyday life, and then just the mere suspicion made these white men think that they had the right to approach him with guns. And as if he didn't have the right to fear for his life, with men he doesn't know approach him with guns. They did not follow the instructions of the police when they called to just watch and not actually engage him. They took it upon themselves, and ultimately he ended up dying. And for 2 months, the police had this footage, the video, no action. And then I believe it was leaked to a radio station. And then finally, when it made the rounds around social media and people could see exactly what happened, they made an arrest. And this is just the good side of this case, if there can be one, is the power of social media, in particular black social media. But then also the disheartening thing is they had this evidence, nothing new came out, but they chose not to prosecute after what these men did, murdered him in cold blood. It was a modern day lynching where they decided he was a criminal and that they're going to be judge, jury, and executioner right there on the street. So thoughts on that?
I feel like that kind of goes back to our topic when we were talking about Breonna Taylor, where I feel like justice is never served, or people don't even bother mentioning a person's death because there's no physical evidence for them to see. I feel like people are more prone to taking action when it's in their face and they see things that are happening. When there's videos that are leaked, I feel like there's more emotional trauma there because you physically see that person suffering. You see that person fighting for their life. So I think that's where the disconnect happens sometimes, and that's where all Black Lives Matter should come into play, because just because a video isn't attached to the crime doesn't mean that you still shouldn't speak up or post about it or share their story, say their name, etc., etc. And the craziest part about that story is there was a backstory about Ahmaud's life where he was actually an aspiring electrician, and they said it was break-ins in the neighborhood recently, and he just wanted to go over to that construction site to see like the little electrical things that were happening, and he was in awe about it. He actually told a few people about it, like, oh, I'm just going over there to check out the house, see what's going on inside, because I'm obviously aspiring to go to school for this. His family has a history as being electricians. So for him to be slain for something that he was just admiring as a future career for himself just makes it worse.
And then when I think of this case, because it also reminds me of Trayvon Martin's case, when are we as black men allowed to fear for our lives? Because you heard the people saying, well, he should have complied when they said stop. And then when they end up engaging us and we fight, then they say, well, I felt fear for my life, so that's why I ended up killing him. That's what George Zimmerman's defense was. I'm sure that's what these men are saying. But as black men, we're not allowed to fear for our lives. A complete stranger approaches us and demands that we stop, or we answer for who we are to them, and they're armed. And we're supposed to comply with that? I'm a man. If somebody's approaching me with a gun that I don't know, I'm assuming you're looking to do me harm. So that's the other thing, whereas we're not even allowed to protect ourselves. You engage me, and then you end up, feeling that you're in danger because of what you've done by putting me in danger, and then you think you have the right to get off.
Yeah.
That situation never happens if you don't do something that you should not have done to begin with. So that's the thing that really frustrates me, because there's always the parade of people who want to say how, ultimately make it as if that unarmed black person, male or female, contributed to their own death.
Exactly. And it was 2 of them and 1 of him. So I just never understand, how do you feel like your life is in danger more than himself when you had somebody else to help you pretty much pull him down?
Absolutely. So those are just 2 of the examples, and how many unspoken cases, unknown cases are there out there right now or from the past? But and those are 2 that are recent, and we'll move on to the next one. In the case that's really, I think, sort of brought a lot of these issues to a head in terms of protests and even riots to a degree in some places, has been the George Floyd case. I've seen a lot of powerful videos. This one, to me, may be one of the most powerful that I've ever seen, where 3 police officers, 3 white police officers, were kneeling on him. We've seen a ton of video footage from different angles. At no point did it look like he was violent, resisting arrest, and the whole thing was over. I've heard different accounts. It was either they thought it was a fake check, a bad check, or a counterfeit bill, a $10 bill or $20 bill or something. So we've seen all kinds of footage. And George Floyd ends up face down on the ground with 3 police officers with their knees on him, one in particular with his knees on George Floyd's neck. George Floyd is pleading with these police officers for, that he can't breathe, that he's in pain. And then after he becomes unresponsive, he's not making a sound, these police officers still continue to kneel on him, one officer on his neck with his hands in his pocket, for another 2 or 3 minutes, while people in the surrounding bystanders are pleading with the police, telling him his nose is bleeding, he's not responding, check him. And to me, that in itself is a microcosm of how America has treated African Americans at large, where our suffering is irrelevant, doesn't matter. In fact, not only do you not care about the suffering, you can be the direct cause of the suffering, and you're absolutely fine with watching someone who has done nothing to deserve that just die at your hands. And we have 1 officer who was arrested, but the other 3 should be arrested and charged with the same exact crime. Hopefully that does happen. But now you've got the parade of people who are saying, well, the riots, that's not a peaceful protest, and that's not going to prove the point. And obviously we don't condone rioting at all. But it's just frustrating when people want to condone the response to the injustice more than the injustice itself. And again, it's always put on us. We're the victims, but then we're supposed to show restraint and compassion that's not shown to us. So I know there's a lot there, and I'll let you, give your thoughts on it, but that was just the most powerful case that we've seen. All of these are tragedies, and it's signs of the systemic racism we face in our institutions, but seeing a man die on camera again, similar to Eric Garner, shows that in that time period, we've gone nowhere.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I feel like it's a lot of moving parts with this scenario specifically, especially because this is the most current and probably the biggest outcome, I would say, as far as outcry and wars or whatever case you want to call it. But for the protesters and the riots, I feel like it's such a back end for a lot of people, because they're always saying we should have a peaceful protest. But then when Colin Kaepernick was kneeling, they said no, not like that. And then when the basketball players wore the I Can't Breathe t-shirts during their warm-ups, they said we don't like that. They wanted to stop that.
Told LeBron James to shut up and dribble.
Exactly. Taraji P. Henson, when she won her Oscar for Hidden Figures and she brought it up, people discriminated against her for that and said she shouldn't use the Oscars in that moment to bring up injustice in the black community when it's supposed to be such a joyous occasion. And obviously the Oscars is dominantly white. There's just a whole bunch of things with that. So it's like, what more do you want African Americans to do to let you know that we're tired, we're fed up, we're scared, we want change in America? The other thing, I actually watched the 10-minute video of what happened.
Twice.
And it was heartbreaking. And I saw two different videos of different angles. One was of the 17-year-old girl who captured it, and a lot of people, I started seeing some posts on my Facebook feed from friends. I had to check them and delete some people, because they were saying, if you felt the need to pull out your phone and record the man, why didn't you help? And my whole thing is, if you actually watch the video, you see a lot of people speaking up for him and going against the cops, getting into the street to almost like try to help him. But at the end of the day, if you're African American, how can you really help someone else when they're being attacked by the cops? Usually 911 and the police are who you call when you're supposed to get help. And then if that man is already on the ground, there's 4 people holding him down, don't seem like they care about his life, you're putting yourself at risk as well, because you know you could possibly die. I feel like for them to speak up was obviously a big help. And then I think the girl who actually did pull out her phone and recorded is probably the biggest help in the world, because that is what got the attention of everybody pretty much globally. Even the UK is protesting right now. So I feel like, had she not pulled out her phone, would this man even get half the justice that he's getting right now? We can't even fully call it justice yet, because not much has fully happened yet.
No, it's not justice. And even the charge itself, which is he's being charged with, the officer was arrested, the one who had his knee on his neck. He's being charged with 3rd-degree manslaughter. And essentially that is a lesser charge than murder, because it's saying that your intention was not to kill.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe this was a 2nd-degree murder charge, because when somebody's telling you they can't breathe and you're the cause of them not being able to breathe, at that point, if they die as a result of that, you clearly had an intention. Or it was such gross negligence and lack of empathy and humanity on your part that, to me, it's the equivalent of willingly killing them. It's not like this was an accident. It's not like they got into a fight, 2 people in a fight, somebody got hit and hit their head on the sidewalk and died or something like that. There was a clear, intention to, from my perspective, those officers knew what they were doing. And even when he was limp and they were putting him on the stretcher, you just saw no compassion whatsoever. Almost like they were picking up, a dead animal off the side of the road.
They just flopped him on the gurney, and they didn't even rush to the hospital. They took their sweet time. 2 other things I wanted to mention too is that the main officer who was kneeling on his neck, actually knew him prior to that altercation, because a lot of people obviously investigated like the backgrounds of everybody involved, and they were both working at the same nightclub a few years back. The officer was an off-duty cop outside, and George Floyd was security inside the club. So a lot of people are thinking that this was premeditated, like he probably had a hidden agenda against him, where it could have been jealousy, rage, anger, whatever, and he used
or maybe
his
he knew
power.
something about that cop. And again, I'm not throwing speculation out, but did he know something about that officer that officer doesn't want people to know about?
Yeah, I'm like, it's so many different unknowns at this point, where he had this planned already, and he was probably happy that a 911 call was made for George Floyd. He's like, oh, this is my chance. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention is the Officer Tao, who was an Asian American cop, who was the one standing and yelling at the bystanders to tell them to move back. It's none of their business, stop recording. They're doing their job. And for him to also be a minority and to not even understand, especially for him to be, I don't know what he is, maybe he's Chinese or whatever, but for him to be a minority period and to not even feel for George Floyd being on the ground like that, and then for all the other bystanders to be genuinely concerned, it was bad.
Yeah, and again, when I say this whole scene was a microcosm of the black experience in America, because many of the rights that we fought for, immigrants to this country, people of other ethnicities who have come here, are the benefactors of our suffering and our fight.
Mm-hmm.
And it's frustrating when we see other minorities stand by, because black people we stand with the immigrant community. We're always willing to get into the fight because we know what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
But when we're the ones who are being targeted and suffering, And I'm not saying this is a blanket statement, but not enough other, when people say the term people of color, there's not enough other people of color in mass, in large numbers, to stand with us. And that's the thing that's frustrating. And while the officer, I think it's Tao, was not on him as a bystander, allowing it to happen, saying, it's not me, so I'm just gonna, do what I'm doing here. That's often.
And he even said at the point, because when he was screaming, I can't breathe, and he was yelling out for his mama, and he was like, do you really think that he can't breathe if he's sitting here yelling and screaming? And then at that point, when he started to pass out and lose consciousness, a few of the bystanders was like, well, he's not talking no more, he's not moving anymore, his eyes are closed, do you still think that he's joking or faking it? And that's when he didn't even have a response for that. He was just telling everybody to back up and mind their business at that point.
Exactly. And again, it's just, to me, it's, and that's how oftentimes our community is looked at. Well, it's not that bad, or, people are trying to race bait or blame racism. And no, we're telling you, we can't breathe collectively as a people. And unfortunately, there's too many people who sit on the sidelines, but it's a tragedy all the way around. It's happened before. Unfortunately, it probably will happen again, but, so those are the three where we've lost Black lives, but one more case that we definitely want to touch on, because it could eventually have led to something similar to what we've seen in these other cases. And the last case we want to touch on, which fortunately did not end in the death of an innocent Black person, but was right in New York in Central Park. Christian Cooper is 57-year-old African-American man. I've never heard of the term, he's a birder, which is somebody who's into bird watching. So I guess it's a really big thing in that particular section of Central Park called the Ramble, where it's a lot of different species of birds. So people go there to try to get photos and so on. So he's in a park. There's a woman, her name's Amy Cooper, I think, and she has her dog off the leash. In that section of the park, you're supposed to have your dog on the leash. He told her to leash her dog. She didn't. And I guess they got to, back and forth discussion. It didn't seem hostile at any point when he was recording. And I guess the thing that really set her off was, there's a lot of people who are birders there will carry dog treats. That way, if they're trying to, get the dog to not scare away a bird or something like that, or I guess some dogs, they've even attack some of the birds. So they'll get the treats to distract the dog. So I guess once he was looking to, pull the treats out of his pocket, she got irate. He starts recording, and it's just interesting that she's approaching him. Mm-hmm. He said to her, please don't come any closer, stay back. Forget just the coronavirus, but you're not fearful when you're trying to be the aggressor. And then you could see in her eyes when she was like, basically, I'm gonna fix you. I'm gonna call the cops. Because it doesn't matter whether I'm right or wrong. I'm a white woman, you're a Black man, you're gonna call the cops. I'm gonna call the cops on you. And she calls, first thing, African-American man threatening me. And then she repeats it several times, the last time working up some hysteria, so it sounds like she's in imminent danger. African-American man threatening my life and threatening the life of my dog. And we all know the rest of the story from that point. The video got out, made its rounds. She got fired from her position at Franklin Templeton. And of course she comes out and says, I'm not racist. And it's ridiculous because you are racist. That is the definition of racism. You used your white privilege to potentially put in harm's way an African-American man who had done nothing wrong. In fact, he was telling you to just follow the rules that people are supposed to follow there. So anyway, bless you.
Excuse me.
So go on and give your take or your thoughts on that.
Honestly, that video, it annoyed me so much too, because she, pretty much everything that you said I agree with. Is not too much that I would want to piggyback off of, because you said everything I wanted to say about how she used her privilege and her status to pretty much try to one-up him, because she knows how much power it could have. And it's sad because let that had gone left, where the cops just immediately attacked him without asking any questions, he could have been dead, or he could have been severely injured. And the crazy thing, like I had mentioned like a few moments ago when we were talking about other people, is they did a background check on him. And they started saying how he was a graduate, he's a bird watcher, he does this, that, and the third. Pretty much all positive things that they deem shouldn't make him be a harmful person in America. And it's like, why does someone have to have a degree to be a positive black man? Why can't he just be a high school graduate who's working at McDonald's? He still should be able to live just like anybody else. It seems like whenever people do a background check and they're from an Ivy League college or something, that's when people are like, oh, I'm sorry, maybe I shouldn't have like judged you or attacked you. It seems like whenever it's connected to something that Caucasians or white Americans are doing, that's when it's deemed okay and accepted.
Yeah, and the other thing that's interesting about that tape that I thought about, or that video, when you watch it, for white folks out there who don't think that institutional racism, police brutality are really a thing, when you watch that video, it's clear she wasn't calling the police because she was in danger. She was calling the police as a retaliation, as a weapon against this black man, because she knew it was an effective weapon, that he didn't have to be wrong, that he didn't have to actually do something, but the very fact that she said African American man threatening me was enough. So anybody who wants to deny that there is a disparity in the treatment of African Americans by law enforcement versus white people by law enforcement, if you're honest and you watch that video, it's clear. She claims she's not racist, she absolutely is, and she recognized that she could use an institution that is rooted in institutional racism, or it permeates throughout the institution of law enforcement. So she was able to
felt some kind of way too, for her to be a white woman and him to be a black man telling her what to do.
Exactly.
She felt like she lost her power.
Exactly. And we've seen, and there's so many issues, we can't go through all of them, but we've seen, not even police officers, but just everyday, white folks approaching black people, questioning them. Do you live in this building? Mm-hmm. Or do you belong in this, office space, or this, place of business? Even, I saw a video of a guy in a parking lot, working for the DMV. I'm not sure what he was doing, and the white lady was questioning him. Are you an employee? Do you work here? And it's almost like, in slavery times where you had free black men and free black women, and you had to carry your freedom papers, and at any time, any white person could stop you and say, let me see your papers.
Exactly.
And you had to show without question that, yes, I'm a free man. So. And
it's like you experience that anywhere. Like even for me, like I live in a luxury apartment area where it's predominantly white people who like are rich or whatever you want to call it, wealthy. And it's like, if they see you without your key fob, which obviously gives you access to the space, they look at you sideways until they see a key fob with you. They don't want to let you through the door if they walked in first, because they want you to tap the key to make sure you live there. It's almost, but if a white person walked behind them, they'll immediately open the door because they expect that person lives there.
And it's just, that's the additional scrutiny, the additional bias that black Americans face every day. So none of this is new, and we could spend the next 10 lifetimes going through all this, but I think maybe we can start talking about what does this mean about America, and where do we go from here? So just on the four cases that we discussed, none of this is new, and the outrage isn't new. Just technology, cell phones are allowing us to see what's gone on for generations in this country. And, what does this mean about America? I think, one, America needs to be honest with itself about where we are as a country, the origins of this country, the treatment of African Americans throughout the history of this country. We need to be honest about the black experience in this country, because it's greatly different from any other experience that any other particular background has. And I think we also need to recognize that the ideals that this country was supposedly built on, while honorable, have never been realized for African Americans in this country. So I think that's the first thing. And when people get angry when black people speak out and they say, well, if you hate this country, why don't you leave or go back to Africa? It's ridiculous because number one, we have as much at stake in this country, probably a greater stake in this country
We built
than
this
anybody.
country for free.
Built it for free. We have fought and died in every single war this country had, even when we didn't have the rights that other people had. We would fight in wars for a country that made us second-class citizens, black men and women. We are only calling this country to actually be what it claims to be. And if anything, that to me is real patriotism. It's not going to the state capitol with a gun because businesses are closed. Those people are supposedly patriots. No, patriot is somebody who's saying this country needs to be better, do better. But the first step is America at large needs to be honest. And the second thing I'll say is, we're at a point where there's only two sides. There's no neutrality. So either, and I say this to specifically, people of non-black people, white folks and people of other ethnicities. There's no, I'm not racist or I'm neutral. Either you are an active participant in the fight for equality and justice and equal treatment of African Americans in this country, or you are either through your action or inaction and a participant in the resistance against that change. So there is no two sides anymore. You cannot stay on the sideline. You cannot just say, I'm a good person and not be involved. So it's one or the other.
And I agree with that because I feel like especially a lot of white people who say they're not racist, but I feel like if you're in a space with your white peers and they're making racist remarks or they're not understanding what's going on in America right now and you don't speak up, you're part of the problem as well.
Exactly. One of the things that was encouraging, on social media and having discussions with white friends, there are a number who have spoken out.
I will say that. Thank you. Because I actually had a friend today who actually sent me a proofread, I guess, of a post that she wanted to put on Facebook, and she sent it to me just to read through to make sure that she's saying the right things and that she's not being offensive and that she's speaking eloquently. I said, you spot on, and I appreciate you for doing that and calling out other people for that.
Exactly, and it was that was encouraging to see, but it was also disappointing at the lack of. It's not in the numbers that you would hope, because systemic racism, while black people have been the victims of it, it's not a black problem. It is a white problem, and it's something that needs to be addressed actively amongst white Americans in these institutions, people who have privilege.
Especially for them to benefit so much off of black culture and to never speak up about it.
Exactly.
It's the most frustrating thing. Exactly.
But I've really paid attention to who's speaking out and who's been silent. And I've been proud of those who've spoken out and been disappointed over some of those who have been silent on the issue. But I think the first thing that as a country, we need to be honest in this falsehood of America being this, perfect place, this land of opportunity and all those things that it claims to be. We need to look and say, no, we don't have the moral high ground in the United States to point our finger at anybody else in the world, because we still have to move forward to live up to what this country actually is supposed to be, in particular for black people.
And the other thing too is a lot of white people always say, well, I don't want to talk about political issues. Even black people, anybody, a lot of people, they say that they don't like talking about political issues or black issues because they don't want to offend anyone on their friends list or they don't want to offend any friends. And my whole thing is, if you feel like you can't post about something on your social media page with your friends, then those people are not your friends in the first place.
And if people are offended because you're calling out injustice, then again, that's my point. By saying you're uncomfortable with the topic and you don't want to get involved, then you're an active participant in the resistance against that change. So again, that's the point that I would make is there's only two sides. There's no neutral ground here. You're either in the fight on the side of progress or you're in the fight against progress. So we've seen the reaction, a lot of it positive, some of it destructive to some of the recent racial injustice examples that we've highlighted today. But we do need to look at what solutions we have, where do we go from here? And I think people speaking out is obviously a step, but it's not a single front fight that we have. We have to do this in multiple ways, and because systemic racism is across a number of spectrums, so we have to attack it and fight it across a number of spectrums. I think part of it is political. That's a huge and important part, but it can't only be political. Yes, we need to register to vote. Yes, we need to hold candidates accountable. And I like the conversation that we've been hearing amongst Black people. Not that we all agree on what it should look like, but saying, listen, we shouldn't just give our votes away freely. We need to really hold candidates and say, what is your agenda for Black Americans? Because so many of the issues that we bring up, they try to tie them or package them in legislation or benefits for other demographics. But like I said earlier, there's no experience like the Black experience. It's unique in what we've experienced and gone through, and we've got unique challenges, and we need specific, unique solutions and legislation that works for our community. So definitely the political aspect, voting, holding candidates accountable. I think economic is a big part of it too. One of the things that we do on this show is promote Black businesses, because we need to actually have resources. We're the only community where our dollars leave the community.
We need to circulate the Black dollar.
Exactly, because with more resources within our community. And one thing I will say, people say is African Americans, we don't have money. If you took African Americans and our buying power and from an economic standpoint, we would be the 9th biggest economy in the world if you just took African Americans. So we need to have a better sense of, collective economics, buying Black businesses, supporting Black businesses. I also think we need to have a more community focus, because that's been lost. We've gotten really individualistic where we've got a lot of high achievers, but we have to have a collective mindset in the fields that we go in, and how can we use our skills and abilities to help our community at large. Again, these aren't going to solve all the problems, but we need to strengthen our community, because the more united we are, the more resources we have, the more political influence we have, the ability to attack a lot of those issues. So I don't know, your thoughts on the different strategies that we have to have, in terms of political and economic. I know you're definitely a proponent of the economic piece.
Oh yeah, and I'm very frugal, and I'm always down to support Black businesses, because that's something that I speak about all the time on my social media platforms. And I feel like for people who are speaking out on social media, that's like half the battle. I feel like it's only so much you can do if you're just posting something on your page. I feel like you also have to be a voice. You have to go out there. Even if you don't want to be a part of a large crowd and protest because you feel like your life is in danger, you need to go out and speak to other people. You need to donate money to these funds that for people who are supporting these causes. The different petitions that are going out. Sign a petition. There's so many other things that you can also do to be an advocate for this economy and community.
Yeah, and I don't pretend to have all the answers. There's people who are a lot smarter than me who, propose very detailed things. But I do know that we're coming to a point where we can't continue to just march and protest. We've got to have collective strategy. We really do. And I'm not saying that we don't have any Black leaders, but we do need Black leadership at all levels. We haven't had prominent Black leadership in the way we did when we made so many advances from a civil rights standpoint in the 50s and the 60s. We need to get organized like that, but it's going to take some sacrifice for a lot of us. We're going to have to give up some luxuries and some comforts, but we have to think about the generation that's coming after us the same way that, slavery, they were thinking about, even if we're not going to get freedom, maybe our kids, our grandchildren were. We're in the civil rights where, maybe we won't realize these rights that we're fighting for, but maybe if we keep fighting, our children, our grandchildren are. So we need to pick up that torch or the baton now and say, what do we have to be willing to do, give up, and sacrifice so that our children and our children's children can hopefully live in a world with more racial equality and justice than we do now. So
I agree with all. You keep taking the words out of my mouth, so I feel like there's nothing else for me to interject.
So yeah, we've got a long way to go, but I think this, and I hope this will wake people up and let them know that the fight's not over. We're still in the fight, and we got to keep it going.
All right, guys, that is the end of our segment. We hope you guys learned a lot today, and hopefully you will digest all the information that we gave to you guys, all of our opinions and our thoughts about everything. We are definitely tired, and for all of the above to be a Black podcast, and we love to speak about Black excellence a lot, but we feel like if we stayed in silence and didn't even bring this up at all, we would be doing a disservice to our community. So if you guys liked what you saw, or just, well, I don't even want to say like what you saw, but if you agree with these things, and if you're an advocate for Black Lives Matter and you want to be an ally, an advocate, you want to help spread the word, definitely like our video. If you guys have any other opinions or thoughts, any questions, or any other, what's the word I'm looking for?
Comments, thoughts, if you want to continue the discussion.
Recommendations, that's what I'm looking for. Any recommendations for other people on how they can get involved, definitely put that in the comment section below, because we would love to hear your thoughts, and I'm sure other people would love to read and learn more about what's happening. If there's any articles that you want to share about how people can use their voice, regardless of their race, how they can use their voice and help be a part of this fight, definitely let us know in the comment section below. And as always, if you guys would like to see more from all of the above, make sure you push that subscribe button below. That's how you stay up to date with everything that's going on our show and receive alerts. And that was a lot to unpack in this episode, but we hope that this is like one step forward for us to see some sort of justice. It's going to be a long time, but you know, take it day by day, one step at a time.
And we just want to be part of that conversation to start propelling things forward. So it's definitely not going to be the last time that we have these discussions and that we try to address some of these issues. So we'll continue to speak as needed.
Yes, and to all of our brothers and sisters out there who are protesting right now, please stay safe, stay healthy. And as always, I'm your girl Angel Marie, and I'm sitting here with my co-host Kevin.
See you guys next time.
See you guys next time.
Wednesdays at 7, Angel, Marie, and Kevin playing the illest records, bringing us back together. Philly is all season, storming through any weather, leaving the track bleeding. Way we pull it together, we applying my pressure.